I'd like to call to order the San Luis Obispo County Flood Control and Water Conservation District Water Resources Advisory Committee for today, Wednesday, December 5th. And to start with, if you are a voting member, if you could please raise your hand so we can establish quorum.
Seventeen.
17, so we have quorum. Thank you very much. And I would like to, if it's all right with everyone, switch up the order just a little bit because we have staff here for what is currently item 6 on the agenda. So I'd like to shift that to be item 4, and we'll just bump everything down if that's all right. Are there any objections to that change to the agenda? Sweet. All right, great, thanks. Now for the first item here for approval of the meeting minutes. Were there any comments or changes to the meeting minutes from November 7th? All right.
Approval.
Move approval. Linda and Christine, thank you very much. All in favor?
Oh, wait, no, we'll do
roll call.
So Christine is second.
Oh, I forgot introductions.
Oh yeah,
Okay,
we
we'll
can
do
that.
this
We
and then
can
we'll
do
go
that.
around.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Dennis Laux,
Yes.
Bill Garfinkel, or Neil McDougall. Okay. Linda Seifert,
Yes.
Jim Gehring,
Yes.
Greg Graywall,
Yes.
Kurt Bollinger, or
Abstain.
Patrick Williams. Okay. Jason Yeager,
Yes.
Greg Nestor, or Tim Walters.
Yep.
Okay, Christy Mulholland,
Yes.
Eric Greening,
Yes.
David Chipping, or Steph Wald. Okay. Linda Chipping,
Yes.
Michael Broadhurst, or Tom Mora. Okay. John Neal. Okay. George Kendall.
Yes.
Anthony Lindstrom,
Yes.
Steve Sinton,
Abstain.
Lee Nesbitt,
Yes.
Barbara Harmon. Okay. There's Charles Bourbeau or Nick DeBar. Okay. Debbie Peterson.
Yes.
All right. Chris Alacal or Kirk Gonzalez. Okay. Marcia Guthrie. Okay. Andy Peace.
Yes.
Bob Gressens.
Yes.
Okay. Craig Armstrong. Cynthia Reflogel.
Yes.
All right. And do we also have Tina Meyer? Okay. All right. Motion carries.
Thank you. All right, now, forgive me, let's go back and do introductions. I'm Andy P., City of San Luis Obispo City Council.
Linda Seifert, representing District 3.
Jason Yeager, Ag at Large.
Jim Gehring, District 4.
Tim Walters, Development at Large. Bob Gressens, Cambria CSD.
Melissa Bland, Cambria CSD. Monique Madrid, Cambria CSD.
George Kendall, Farm Bureau.
Steve Sinton, Shannon San Juan.
Debbie Peterson, City of Royal Beach.
Kirk Bollinger, Ag at Large.
Greg Graywall, 5th District Representative.
Dennis Laux, 1st District Representative.
Cynthia Reflogel, Oceana Community Services District.
Tony Lindstrom, Golden State Water.
Charlie Cody, S&T Mutual Water, Los Osos.
Shirley Gibson, alternate for Oceana CSD. Linda Nickel, County Now.
Lee Nesbitt, EPC.
Brendan Clark, South County Public Works.
Iowa Sammix, Will County Public Works.
Eric Greening, Environmental at Large.
Linda Chipping, Coastal San Luis RCD.
Brian Pedrati, Slow County Planning.
Christine Mulholland, Environmental at Large, alternate.
Ben Trooper, County Planning.
Oh, Ray Dienzo, Public Works.
Excellent, thanks everyone. All right, we'll go on to our ongoing updates. I'll just call them out one by one if you have any questions, comments, concerns. Rain and reservoir report. Anybody have today's nacimiento? Something good, I hope. Groundwater basin management efforts. Integrated regional water management. Stormwater resource plan. And the other, the county water programs, policies, ordinances, ongoing list there. Any open reporting on water conservation opportunities? Eric Greening.
I'm not sure whether you'd call this a conservation opportunity or an information opportunity, but tomorrow the Regional Water Quality Control Board will be meeting in San Luis Obispo at their headquarters down toward the airport. And a major topic for their morning session is going to be the impacts of climate change as well as both mitigation and adaptation. And one of the presenters will be someone familiar to us, namely Laden Bandov. But it's obviously not a county entity, but they are listening to county people and people with county experience. And some of the policy directions that may grow from it, even though they're not action items in front of them, are certainly things we will want to keep track of, because they have many of the same concerns. They're coming from the angle of quality, but anything that affects quality and things like seawater intrusion and so on definitely affects supply as well.
Good points. Thank you. Yeah, Greg.
Yeah, something to do with different water programs. Now, I don't know how many people know this, but the two basins that are affected are the Paso Robles Basin and then the Como Mesa Basin. And they have to do with buying offsets, which aren't really offsetting anything. So for $17 and some change in the Como Mesa, or $16 and some change in the Paso Basin, so they take they're using 300 gallons a day, which over 365 days is 1/3 of an acre foot. So they're charging you, if you want to build a home over the basin, you're going to pay close to $5,000 extra for your offset. That's not offsetting anything. They're not saving any water. They're not trading a use. You're paying this money so they can give the money to use for toilets or washing machines or stuff. I don't know how many toilets we got left for the last 5 years that they've replaced or not replaced. This also is what they're doing with marijuana. So I got somebody next to me, they have to go in and say how much they're going to use per gallon, per day, and then they're coming up with a fee based on that $16 and some change. And they're not offsetting anything. I don't know what they're going to use that money for, that the marijuana people are paying. So that could be any amount as long as they're willing to pay. So there's other people that haven't been able to use their land for whatever ag purposes they want, and now they've come up with a way to charge people which really doesn't have an offset. So I don't know who came up with it, but it doesn't seem realistic.
Do we have a staff response, or is that something that we want to bring back, a little bit of clarification about the water offset program? I mean, I think in theory, the idea is that you collect the fees and that has a proportional amount of water use reduction, but it might help to know what the calculation process is. I see everybody eyeing each other.
We can, with the county, we can try to bring something back.
I manage that program.
Can you stand up and
Sure.
just...
My name's Kylie. I manage the program that charges those offset fees, and then runs the different retrofit and turf removal programs. Which part of the county are you in?
I'm in Creston,
In
up in
Creston?
Paso area.
So over the Paso?
I don't live over the basin, but if I was building a home and I was being charged almost $5,000 more, when everything I'm putting into my new structure is water efficient, I'd be upset that I was paying for somebody else to replace stuff that they should replace on their own.
So the thinking behind the ordinance was to create water neutral development in basins that were overdrafted. So it's in fact in the Paso Basin and the Napomo Basin. And it is structured like you said. Any new development does pay a fee, the set amount per gallon, and then it funds the plumbing retrofit program and the cash for WRAC program. I'm not going to speak to the fairness of the program, but that's what the board approved back in 2015. And you're right in saying that the cannabis program will generate similar fees.
Is it an in lieu fee, or is it, because I sort of remember that you had to offset your water use one for one or 2 for
Right.
1.
So the idea is to offset water use 1-to-1.
So you're offsetting it plus you're paying the in lieu fee?
No. So you're paying the fee.
So you can pay
So,
the
for
fee
example,
or
in Los
offset it.
Osos, there's a different water neutral development plan where to build a house, you go and you have to accumulate enough water credits yourself to get a certificate to build. And in Paso Como, instead of doing that, you can pay a fee, and basically we as the county do that work for you. That was the idea behind the program.
I just don't see the, I know there's people that are wanting to expand their marijuana operation, filed an application, don't have approval yet, they're already expanding their operation without the approval. And I don't know how much water they're going to use or not use, but they're on ground that was never farmed. They might have had cattle on it or something, so they didn't have an offset, but they're buying an offset. So what are they offsetting?
So, and Kylie, is there a kind of a quantifiable, do we have a way to quantify the actual kind of the gallons that are being anticipated to use compared to kind of the dollars coming in, and so we can equate it to actual gallons being not drawn from that same, and it's basin specific, right?
Yes, so for each basin, so for the Paso Basin and the Como Basin, we have a tracking sheet, and we track the new water demand from the new development, and then the water saved from participation in the programs that are funded by the retrofit fees. So we have that water balance and then the money balance.
Yeah, but it just seems to me like it's just collecting money. I don't know what they're going to be used for, but somebody's using more water. Now, according to the law, which they're supposed to be following on Sigma, if they're 2 acre feet or less, which they're basing it on 1/3 of an acre foot, they're de minimis users and they're not supposed to be punished. And they're being punished on a basis of gallons per day of use, like for the new home. It's based on 1/3 of an acre foot of water for that year, which is under the 2 acre feet de minimis user. So it just doesn't seem to jive with what's being done in groundwater sustainability co-op while they're preparing the GSP. Maybe it all changes when the GSP is done.
I can't speak to the cannabis program and their organization, but if you want more information about that, we can get that for you.
Thanks.
All right. And is there interest in having kind of an update on the kind of the offsets program? We can either just send some, but if there's enough folks who want it, we can agendize that for the future. It's just kind of a show of hands.
We'll know the effectiveness.
Yeah, the effectiveness of the offsets, I think, would be important. All right, looks like there's enough interest, so we'll find a time where you guys can come and present. And I think in particular, since the cannabis is a new operation, that'd be good to understand the impacts there and the relation to the basin.
The question that Greg asked though at the end there about whether the GSP is going to override that ordinance requirement, that would be a pretty big thing to know.
Right. Yes. Yeah, the relationship with the GSPs. All right, thank you. Any other comments on water conservation, et cetera? Yeah, Linda.
I have a question regarding the basin boundary modification results that came back from DWR for the 2 basins that applied for modifications. That was Los Osos and Heritage Ranch. And I'm aware that the one for Heritage Ranch, was it Heritage Ranch?
Yes.
Yes, was denied, but the one for Los Osos, their application to separate from the adjudicated area of the Los Osos Basin was approved. So now there's a Los Osos sub-basin and a Warden Creek sub-basin, which is the upper. But the other part of the Los Osos application was denied, and I don't know what that means. You know, why was it denied, and what does it mean?
Yeah, I wish I knew more of the details. Yeah.
So,
Sorry, Mladen, can you introduce yourself?
I'm Lawton Bando, County Public Works. Yes. So the two parts, the Warden Creek sub-basin, Los Osos Basin, were created out of that basin boundary modification. The eastern portion, or the part that goes down into like Montandero, that area was the western. Thank you. Western area was removed, and there was a little tiny piece on the kind of the northeastern. It was kind of like that was the part that was denied. It was a tiny bit, and I don't know the name of it, but there was like a third part of that application. That's the part that was denied.
Okay, because they had, I think there was a section that was up sort of towards Montana de Oro, and then I know there were a couple little tiny properties over on.
It was the tiny little properties that will remain as they are.
Oh, shucks.
2 out of 3. Yeah.
So do you know why Heritage Ranch? I know it says scientific reasons, but their water all comes from Nacimiento. They're not pumping water out of the basin.
I don't know why Heritage Ranch was denied. I didn't read that.
Who would we ask if we wanted to follow up on that?
Carolyn.
Yeah, Carolyn would be. Okay, it's going out to public comment though. So.
Oh, thank you. I'm scared to ask, but what happened with the El Pomar recognition at the Board of Supervisors?
Good. They are here.
We're good. Okay. Thank you. Okay, anything else on water conservation? And then the last item on the ongoing updates was the schedule for 2019. Of note is one that some of the meetings won't be in this, won't be in the library. They'll probably be across the street at council chambers. So keep an eye out for that. And then we also are not having a meeting in January. Correct.
Yeah.
Correct. So no meeting in January. So our next meeting after today will be in February. Okay. All right, so now with the adjusted agenda, we'd like to have a report from the ad hoc subcommittee for the review of the 2016-2018 water section of the resource summary report. Consider actions. We've actually, we're going to have Brian go ahead and start the, open it up and with an overview of where we're at.
All right. So my name is Brian Pedrati. I'm with County Planning. And Ben Schuster and I are working on the resource summary report that we provided a presentation in October, I think it was, to the WRAC, just kind of getting an idea of what it is. So at the October WRAC meeting, we asked this body to create a subcommittee to study the RSR water and wastewater drafts. There's 2 chapters that are germane in particular to this body, and the WRAC did form that subcommittee, and we met with the subcommittee about a week and a half ago after they had reviewed it and provided some comments. And so I'll let the WRAC subcommittee, the ad hoc committee, present some of their findings, but overall we're looking to take all the comments from the draft, be it from the WRAC subcommittee, from the full WRAC, that should be from the full WRAC, and then all the other agencies, and also, you know, any comments we receive from individual CSDs or from individual people, anybody from the public, and we're going to incorporate all of those as appropriate into a final draft, and we're going to Planning Commission as soon as we can get that all done hopefully in January, February, and then on to the Board of Supervisors in February, March. So that's where we're at.
When are the comments due?
Sorry.
When are the comments due?
We would like, to get to the Planning Commission, we would like the comments due by mid to a little later in December. So in the next 2 to 3 weeks would be great if you want them incorporated into the final draft. You can bring comments all the way up to the Planning Commission and to the board if, once those dates are published. It's going to be a public hearing at the Board of Supervisors. It's going to be a study session at the Planning Commission. So not really a full hearing, but it'll function sort of as a hearing. And so, but in order to get them into the final draft, we ask that they're kind of later December at the very most. And
December 20th? Are you?
December 20th would be great. We're getting, as we get into the end of December, we're getting into the, we could get them till the end of the year, but, we're getting into the holiday season and everything, so that's why we're hoping 20th would be a great date if we want to nail down a date.
I might have missed what you said, Brian. I'm sorry about the Planning Commission. Is that going to be the first meeting then?
Yes.
And what date was that again?
We don't have a date yet, but we're shooting for end of
You
January.
think it's sometime in January?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
All right. Do any of the members of the subcommittee or the ad hoc committee want to make a comment? Tim or Jim?
Yes, please. I'm going to start with page 72. If anybody doesn't have the report, there's only like 2 pages of information for the Paso Robles Basin. It's 505,000 acres. And in the 4th paragraph, it says that this report does not attempt to evaluate the water supply. I'm wondering if it doesn't attempt to evaluate the water supply, why is it making a recommendation of level of severity, regardless of what the level is? It doesn't mention the population of the unincorporated people, which is about 18,000 people, that they don't all live over the basin. Some of them are in the watershed, but there's no well information. We have 4 reports starting from 2002 to 2005, 16 and 18 that give safe field numbers. There's no mention of the safe field or the average safe field, even if you don't want to pick one of those, which is about, the average is about 94,000 acre feet. So I have concerns with some of the CASGEM information. There's just lacking a lot of stuff to me for such a big basin with things. And basically, I understand, and Brian and Ben are doing, they do they're doing a lot of work. And this is a reflection on what's happened here over the last 2 years. And there's information that's newer that's not in this report that was out of their control because they're writing on what had happened, not where we're at right now. So the Atascadero subbasin is a separate basin. They have a low priority. They have a separate safe yield number that's separate to this. There's no listing of the different amounts of water that come from the different sources, like Nacimiento source, the Salinas River source, the state water source in Shandon is the only area that gets water from the state. The state numbers for the water for what were projected aren't correct, and they're missing Morro Bay. So the state water isn't right. So there's just a whole bunch of little things here and there. I don't know as much, obviously, about some of the other basins in the county as I do about the Paso Basin. And so I just like to see a lot more information put in there, regardless of whether we stay level 3, go to level 1, go to level 2. I think there's a lot more information that can be put in there that I'm going to supply Brian and Ben here at a later date. Thank you for your hard work.
You have a response on that?
That was part of the discussion we had at the subcommittee. Mr. Graywell's comments were good because the Paso Robles, and just information-wise, the Paso Robles groundwater basin, the section there does a lot of times refer back to the 2014, 2016 version of the RSR because of the GSP that's being formed, and it's sort of it's in this weird transition period right now because of the state efforts with groundwater basins. So, but given that, I think we understand that there should be more information per Greg's comments. Maybe we can add in some just more information that justifies why we're still keeping it at a level of severity 3. So that was just on that one.
Okay.
But we'd like to, and I know that Mr. Grohl is going to provide some comments before
Good.
December 20th.
All right. Yeah, Jim, were you?
Sarah?
Sorry, where do you guys have a list of references? I see, things noted from the tables, but do you have the compiled list of documents that you reviewed? Or can you guys put that together?
Yeah, I'll have to check with we hire a consultant, kind of sends us most of the so I can check with them, and I think there is, and if so, I can send it out through Ray to the group.
Just so we know that,
Sure.
what was actually put into this.
Yeah, are you looking more for, like a reference list at the end?
I think any type of, what every report should have is a bibliography, right?
Which I think there is.
Or works cited.
Yeah, you're looking at a section of the
Correct.
overall report.
We gave you the things that we the WRAC were the 2 chapters, but I think previous editions had a full reference list at the end with some of those references just embedded in the chapters after the tables and things like that. But there should be a reference list in the full version.
Great. Eric?
Just a note in terms of, and this is not the fault of any preparers, it's simply the fault of the scope right now of the RMS. We're looking at specified basins, we're not looking at the entire county, and most specifically, we're not looking at the many fractured rock areas that are, some of which are significantly out of balance from anecdotal information, but about which we have little comprehensive data. So we shouldn't lean our entire view of the county's water picture on the RMS because it's not looking at everything.
Good point. Thank you. Other comments, Christine?
Yes, thank you. I'm Christine Mulholland, and I'm the alternate for Sue Luft, and these comments I am presenting are from Sue for you today, please. She says she has one slight concern on item 6, page 1 of the RSR. Staff recommends a definition for LOS 3, which I believe matches the current definition. Tim Walters suggests in his comments that the phrase, and that is, Tim, I believe your second comment, page 1, deleted, that you suggest that the phrase, or the time required to correct the problem is longer than the time available before the dependable supply is reached. Sue recommends that not be stricken. She doesn't agree that this phrase should be removed, but she's not sure that it really affects the definition of LOS 3 in the end. The full definition is water demand projected over 15 years or other lead time determined by a resource capacity study equals or exceeds the estimated dependable supply, or the time required to correct the problem is longer than the time available from the dependable supply before the dependable supply is reached. That's the quote, the full definition that she quotes, and part of it Tim is recommending be deleted. Let me finish her comment and then I'll listen to whatever you have to say. A groundwater basin and overdraft such as the Paso Basin will certainly be shown as such over a 15-year period. However, the 15-year language seems to require an analysis of the situation when just a simple review of the data shows the problem. The phrase which Tim wants stricken gets to the core of the problem without unnecessary analysis. And that is Sue's comment.
Okay.
Okay.
Tim?
Well, the only reason I said, the sentence to me is ambiguous. It doesn't really have any true meaning with regard to what should be done. But more importantly, if you go back on the level of services, my assumption is that it doesn't just go from level of service 0 to level of service 3. And when you look at level of service 1 and 2, there are implementation components to those severity levels that require that you implement programs to mitigate the problem. That's why when I looked at that sentence, it seemed like it didn't really need to be in there because it doesn't really apply. Because in theory, you've already started implementing measures to mitigate the groundwater issue. That's where I was coming from on that. It wasn't like I was trying to be, funny about it. If you look at level of severity 1, it talks about implementing programs that stem the tide, so to speak, of the problem within 5 years. And so by the time you get to level of severity 3, those programs should already be in action. That was my point. But it's a comment, so.
Right.
I would add probably before maybe Jim chimes in, and I think Jim's comments and Greg's comments are all good because, I think it was 4 years ago, or not the last time, but the time before, when looking at the RSR in a vacuum as the document that's going forward to the board, it seems like there's not a lot of substance to it, like Greg was talking about. There's missing detail. So when you're looking at it in a vacuum, it's hard to really discern whether or not, like for example, if you're looking at water data in a table, there's nothing to really know how to interpret that except to take the word of whoever the author is and say this is what is there. So, honestly, my comments, and it's even hard to kind of discern what I'm going for in, looking at it that way as opposed to just track changes. But the idea is that, when I was looking at it, it was more from the standpoint of, does this document make sense in the way it's written? And I think what we've found over time is the RSR is more of just a kind of like an executive summary versus an actual detailed document like the RMS. So.
Thank you. Jim, do you want to jump in?
So, Jim Gehring, I'm one of the subcommittee members, and just to be clear, my level of interest really lies at what is known as the Northern Cities Management Area. And just to refresh the committee's recollection, lawsuit started back in the mid-1990s between Santa Maria and landowners in that area, and ultimately involved over 1,000 different landowners by the time it was settled. It was settled in 2005, and a number of constraints and requirements came out of that settlement. And of those, it created 3 management areas: the Santa Maria Valley Management Area, the Homo Basin Management Area, and the Northern Cities Management Area. So that's where I'm connected. I've been on the Northern Cities Management Area technical group for 15 years or so. And not to confuse anybody, the Northern Cities Management Area is Red Randy, Grover Beach, Pismo Beach, Oceano, and the Cienega Valley, where you see all the farmlands out towards the ocean. So out of all that, going back a year and a half ago, this committee made comments to county staff on the RSR that was in preparation at that time. And I noticed in reviewing those, and those comments, by the way, came through the committee and were confirmed by the committee and agreed to be sent on to the county staff. And I noticed that a number of those comments did not seem to appear in the latest RSR version. So I'm thinking that county staff needs to re-review those and see if there's some reason why they were not included or at least mentioned. Certainly they all absolutely confirm that the Paloma Mesa Management Area is a level of service 3. Then the next thing is that more recently, between the Paloma Mesa Management Area and the Northern Cities Management Area, we've been through a consultant preparing a groundwater model that looks at the Arroyo Grande Napomo area. And that model seems to be double confirming the level of service 3 that's applicable to the Napomo Mesa Management Area. So out of all that, I think that one thing that I would like to leave with the county staff, in addition to all the comments that came through the committee here that we prepared, is that if there's some way to help Napomo Community Services District fund their Napomo Supplemental Water Project, as an example, via these water offset program fees, helping Napomo fund that supplemental water project with those fees instead of perhaps buying toilets, might be a lot more beneficial to the groundwater basin in the Napomo area. So in a nutshell, those are the comments that I raised.
Thank you.
You know, I guess I would add to that I think from my perspective when I read that, it seems like it would be more helpful to the board to have kind of the implementation goals that are established for each water area, to have the actual status of those in addition to the water, the available water. What is happening, in individual areas as it relates to the goals that are set, that are bullet pointed in each area. I think that would be more helpful to the public in general and the board to know what's going on.
So articulate the goals and the status
It has
of
the
those.
goals in there, and just have some information about what's going on.
Okay. Debbie?
Debbie Peterson, City of Rose, and I have been following the water and following Mr. Garing's thoughts about it for 18 years, 14, a long time. And I fully support what he said there, and I would really like to see support for supplemental water for the Mesa. I think it would be a win for all the parties.
Thank you. Linda and then Cynthia.
One of the nice things about the report is the fact that it pulls out each individual unincorporated area and zeroes in on it. But what really, I think besides looking at all the individual trees in this forest, we need to also be looking at the cumulative of that. And at the beginning of the report, they have a list of the water purveyors. And they show what the water deliveries were to these. There's 27 purveyors. The deliveries in 2016, 2017, and then the change, and they show also the 2017 and 2018 deliveries. And if you look at this page, of the 27 purveyors listed, 25 of them increased their water deliveries to customers. Some of them substantially, some by just a few hundred acre feet. And I was surprised at that, because what could possibly lead to that happening when we're so cognizant of needing water conservation? So I went back and looked at the 2014-2016 report, which essentially has the same purveyors. There's a fewer purveyors. And in the 2014 to 2016 report, from 2014 to 2016, the two columns which show the uses for those 2 years, 2014 to 2016, they went down substantially. And they went down because we were in the middle of a drought. That, at least that's my off the top of my head thinking. So it seems to me like at some point, because there isn't much that looks at the county water use as a whole, that maybe in the discussion, that there should be a county-wide discussion about these purveyors in these unincorporated areas and water use over time to track that water use has been going up in unincorporated areas. And what can that be attributed to? Is it because of drought and then drought mandatory measures were let go and people use more water again? Is it a reflection of a population increase? I don't think there's if you think about building permits, I don't think there's enough population increase to affect the amount of going up. So that would be one of the things I would like to suggest that maybe could happen, is that there is a step that they look at the whole picture when they were talking about purveyors and that. And then my other point is that in our water conservation subcommittee, early on had a discussion with county planning, and in talking about the levels of severity, it was drawn to our attention that mandatory water conservation measures only go into effect at the LOS 3. And yet, when I looked at the 2014-26 report, a quote from it says, Level 2 identifies the crucial point at which some moderation of the rate of resource use must occur to prevent exceeding the resource capacity. So in other words, you have to cut back or you're going to wind up in LOS 3 eventually. And so one of the things we've talked about, and we've talked about it in here, is that we would make a recommendation to start to look at implementing mandatory water conservation measures at the LOS 2 level. And I'm not sure how that's done, but that's eventually what we've been looking at. And that's my comment.
Thank you. Cynthia.
Our general manager for the Oceano CSD provided a letter which was emailed to all of you. There's also copies on the back table. And I won't take up time going over all of his comments, but an important one is that the RSR states that, quote, SGMA does not apply to the portion of Santa Maria Basin that is at issue in litigation, the adjudicated area water code section 10720.8. This statement is a legal determination and it may be incorrect, so I think it's important to look at it.
Linda.
I'm just curious whether staff might just explain, once it's approved by the Board of Supervisors, is it merely an informational report or is it used substantively? And if so, how?
So it is primarily a informational alert system document. There are a few areas where it has more of an effect. In the coastal, Title 23 of the Coastal Ordinance, an LOS 3 or 2 triggers a policy that basically says you should prioritize subdivision inside urban boundaries and not outside. So there is some practical, it's limited, but for the most part, it's an informational document, provides recommended actions for the board to actually implement. And so those recommended actions that the board then eventually, they do an ordinance revision, moratorium, those types of things are the actions that then address what the LOS says in the RSR.
Thank you. Greg?
Well,
Sarah?
that's one of the reasons that the safe yield is such an important number whether it's 100% exact or somewhere close. So those 4 reports or 5 reports I was talking about, and there's a report that was done in 2011 that took all those reports and put them in. One of the main guys that worked on most of those reports has spent 25 years just working on this basin, and basically let us know that his whole career is based on looking at the Paso Robles Basin. You have the right to use up to the state field every year. So knowing that number and knowing how much water that you're supposedly using is a big difference, and knowing what other supplies that you have contributes to that, because there's people that have other supplies that aren't using those supplies. And everybody needs to understand that. An example is the city of Paso Robles is not using their 6,488 acre feet of Nazi Meadow water, but they're continuing to try to increase their basin use because it's cheaper. So they're not using best management practices by wasting that other water because it gets turned out. They don't get a new amount every year. They get the exact same amount. And so all these other specific things, they're having to leave 1,500 acre feet of water from what the state gives them on permit out of the Salinas River because of the contamination of the 4,000 acre feet of waste they put in there. And so instead, in lieu of them using some of the Nazi water, they're making them leave some of the Salinas River water in there to dilute their waste. Those are important things too, and all this stuff when we keep looking at conservation efforts and way to maximize the water we have, yet we're not using the other water that we're wasting at the same time because it's costing somebody more. This body knows that we got back, and some of us that said on the looking at the budget, that we got back $1.1 to $1.2 million a year that we paid for the first 6 years on the Nazi Meadow pipeline when we had zero benefit as county people. It went to certain specific deals. That $7.2 million has never been returned, but they got the rest of that acre feet of water. So and then they're saying that, well, they want to use this other source because that one's too expensive and we just want to use it for emergency. But at the same time, there's a lot of things being added outside of the basin because of those fees that are being added in the watershed and within the city limits because there aren't fees like those. And that's why their use is increasing with more constructions of hotels and wine facilities and stuff within the city limits versus in the county. So,
okay.
Yeah.
Thank you. Good. Did you have a last comment?
I haven't seen the other sections, but I was wondering if the informational part will be stated in the report, so it's not taken as Bible, by the Board of Supervisors.
Yes, and there, did we provide the introduction chapter, or was it just the water and wastewater?
No, it was just.
Yeah, so there is a introductory chapter at the beginning that does discuss
the purpose.
The purpose and everything. We'll make sure that we'll take another review of that. Make sure it kind of nails down what I said there.
Well, I think, Brian, I'm not going to speak for Sarah, but I think we did get the introduction component. I think what she's saying is the tables that you have in there's data that you reference as the basis of that information. Is that in the report somewhere, like in appendices or whatever? Because each one of these areas is providing you this information. That's what I was saying. You don't really have any way to quantify what you're writing in there because we don't have the background.
Right. Everything is referenced. I think the question maybe was, going back to her question, is this an informational document or does it have policy teeth or ordinance strain? And so that's what I'll be looking at to make sure that it's clarified what the purpose of the document is, that it's, it isn't something that, enacts a moratorium or something automatically. There is not an automatic trigger in there somewhere. It's more that the board has the option to implement these measures. So we'll look at that.
And then my next question question is, like, not to tack on work to anyone, but has our groundwater group looked at, like, whether or not these statements in here are valid? Like Carolyn and Dick?
Yes.
Okay.
We've partnered with them. All right. Well, thank you for everybody for reviewing it, and thank you to our ad hoc committee members for your work on that. The recommendation is to consider forwarding the compiled subcommittee and committee comments on the review of the water section to County Planning and Building. Of course, I think all comments have been received, but to have them formally come from WRAC, do we need a motion to do this, or is this by a consensus?
Well, Greg was saying that you were going to send comments, but I was wondering, were you thinking you send them to me and I'll send them to Brian?
Way you want me to do it.
Well, I think.
Are they going to be controversial?
Yeah, I don't.
I don't do anything that's not.
Yeah, I don't know if it's possible for us to say like we all agree together on the comments that are generated. I don't know if we can agree to that, but I can the recommendation just says we'll compile all the comments that were generated by our subcommittee group and what we've discussed here today, and then we'll submit them to planning. If we all can agree to that, that's kind of the recommendation.
So they won't be labeled as RAC recommendations, in other words.
They'll be labeled as
I guess compiled comments
from RAC committee members.
Okay, on that basis, yeah.
Okay, Christine, did you want?
So I move that we forward the compiled subcommittee and committee comments on to the County Planning and Building Department.
I'll second.
All right.
Okay.
So Christine.
As long as the word recommendations is not there, I will happily second and support.
Right, comments. Good point.
And that'll include, even, what Oceano today, what we submitted today, so what Cynthia brought over, so that's all included. And also, just to remind what Brian, just reiterate what Brian said earlier, the comment, the idea of the whole by the end of December is so that we can include it into the packet, right? But you can each agency can certainly keep making comments, even right up to the time where you go before the board. But it would be good to get them before, to have them included in the packets. So.
Yeah, and that way we can incorporate them and/or respond if they're not going to be incorporated or something.
Great, thanks. Can we do that by voice vote?
Yeah, we can do it by voice.
All right, so the motion is to forward the compiled subcommittee and committee comments. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, say nay. All right, motion carries. Thank you. And thank you, Brian and Ben, for your time today. Okay. So we will move on to the next item on our agenda, which is a presentation on water conservation practices on winery operations by Jason Yeager with Niner Wine Estates and a member of the Agriculture at Large.
Thank you. So again, my name is Jason Yeager. I'm the Ag at Large part of the committee here, and I'm also the board chair of the Paso Robles Wine Country Alliance and director of Vineyards and Niner Wine Estates, which is what we'll be talking about today. So, and this is purely going to be grape growing and a little bit of winery. I'm not a winery guy, but I'll go into a little bit of winery stuff. As much as I know. So anyways, to give you a few facts about Niner is a LEED certified winery. It's a certification that a lot of you builders know. It's the title here is Leadership in Energy Efficiency and Environmental design. Yeah, exactly. So you guys know more than me. So that has to do with the overall building, the way it's built, the overall use of it, and how it's used. And so, and it includes everything, including water, energy efficiency, ergonomics, and things of that nature. So, the vineyards are also SIP certified since 2012. Part of that is to addresses water use. So, so you have to monitor your water use, and I'll go into that a little bit later. We're also, this doesn't necessarily pertain to water use, but we're also going into transition to be certified organic. Also, we treat and recycle all of our water at the winery, and it goes into a pond, it gets treated there, and it gets repurposed back into the vineyard. So, and we also collect rainfall off landing on the roof. So we're collecting for every inch of rain. I want to say we're collecting between 35 and 40,000 gallons of water. So we use that directly into the vineyard as we need it during the growing season. So there's a little bit about lead here. More about it here. So we don't need to really get into that. So a little bit about SIP and what we do with that. And I won't bother you with going through all of this here.
Has there been any change in the criteria for SIP over time since you qualified?
Yes, not as far as water use, I don't think, but as far as criteria, yes, they've changed a few things in there. Additions of nitrogen have been one of them, because that's an issue here. There's also trying to think of some of the other, but it used to be 9 chapters you used to do, and now it's 12. So the specifics, I'm not really, I can't really remember it because I do it once a year. And then
That's my sense, that it's essentially a higher bar, but you keep meeting it.
You do, yeah. So, and it's a third-party certified certification, unlike the there's one put on by the California Grape Growers Association, and that is actually a self-certification, so self-assessment, and that doesn't necessarily have a third party to it. So that's what makes it a little bit different versus the COG version. So anyways, and it also prohibits high-risk pesticides, your carbamates, your organophosphates, things like lorsban, malathion, things that are kind of nasty stuff. So one of the ways we monitor is we've invested in this system called drop control. So drop control was originally developed in Chile, and they have been using it down there, I want to say, for about 10 years now. And they recently brought it here about 5 years ago. And basically this is a system that monitors the weather, it monitors the soil moisture out in your field through soil probes, and it's real time, so it takes a measurement every 15 minutes, and you can get on the computer and see it actually, see what's actually going on out there. And part of the weather station also takes into consideration evapotranspiration, which is a calculation of how much water the vines are using out there. And that's something that I can use as far as what kind of replenishment I might use on the vineyard there. So So, and then there's other things that it does. It actually controls my whole irrigation system, so I can tailor make every single block to as far as irrigation. I can either use hours or I can use inches of water. So I'll show that to you here. So this is a graph of some water measurements here. I know it's a little bit, you can't really see it, but anyways, this is there a laser pointer here? Yeah, it is. So this kind of tells you, this is every single line right here is a certain level, and so it measures every 4 inches. So, and you can kind of see, I just did this a few days ago, so you can kind of see some of the rain events. And anyways, you can kind of see where we got quite a bit of rain. This is when we got about 3.5 inches here. So, and then you can also put in some parameters where it'll actually measure and let you know exactly when you need to replenish your water here. So there's a few lines here. You can't really see it that well, but there's a point of replenishment, and then there's a point of field capacity, which is right here. So anything above here is really wet. So,
Jason, is that just for like a section, or is that for like the
so
entire
this is just for I don't have probes in every single block, but I have quite a few of them. I want to say I have about 30 probes in 50 blocks. So it's yeah, I get it.
Size of a block?
What's that?
The size of a block?
They're all over the place, from 1/4 of an acre to 5 acres. So this is one of my biggest blocks. So basically, I'm putting these probes in areas where I know it represents a fairly large area. So it might represent 2 or 3 blocks in that area. So basically, I'm putting probes in an area where I know the noted or the water holding capacity in that particular block. So, and the way I've done that is I actually do bring a soil scientist in, and I've mapped this whole vineyard here, actually all of our vineyards. So they dig, basically how they do that is they dig soil pits, they go down as far as they can until the backhoe can't dig anymore, or they hit hard pan, and the soil scientist will take horizons, so he'll go through, and once he sees a change in the horizon, that's a change in soil. So anyway, so he'll do everything from chemistry analysis to water holding capacity to the amount of rock that's in there, and so it gives you a good idea of how much water you can hold in there, and it gives me an idea of exactly what kind of rootstock that we want to use, which I'll talk about in a little bit here. So this is a little bit on the weather here, and I wish we could see this a little bit better, but basically this is temperature here. This is some of the rainfall events here, and then in between here, these yellow bars here, which you can barely see, is actually the ETO, which is the evapotranspiration that's happening there. So that's what I would use during the season to quantify exactly what the vines are using out there. So this is this is where I do my irrigation program here. So here's a few blocks here, which you can't. I only have a few of them here. This actually goes way down here. So there's about 20. There's actually 36 blocks here. So this particular one. So anyway, so you can see there's 2 parameters I can use as far as watering. I can use basically just duration, which is hours and minutes, which is what this signifies here, or I can use volume, which is in inches of water. So, and this inches of water is a lot easier to use when you know your evapotranspiration, and what you're using out there in the field. So that's where that comes in handy. So, and as soon as I do an order here, it'll come up here where it'll tell me exactly how many hours and what's watering and everything else. So it's real time. It'll also tell me if I've got a leak in the system. It'll actually send me an alert, either by email and or by actually text message. It'll actually give me a call, and when it does that, then I can shut down that particular one and go out and have that fixed before you waste a lot of water. So, and soil is just one way to measure things as far as moisture. So probes are great, but they're not exactly perfect. Sometimes you have them in the area. There might be a little bit of an air pocket next to them, so it might be reading drier than you think it is. So another check we use is actually what they call a pressure chamber here, and this is pretty old technology. This has been around since the late 60s, and basically what you do here is you'll go out in the vineyard and you'll take a leaf off of the vine, and usually about mid-canopy. So you want to use a leaf that's fairly new, but it's got a little age on it. And so what you do is you'll cut the tip of this petiole off here. You'll put it in this chamber lid here. Petiole sticks out, leaf goes in here, and basically you will turn on this. It'll inject nitrogen gas into this chamber here, and then this will give you a reading here. Once you see liquid start coming out of that petiole, you turn off the gas and you take your reading. So basically the measurements here are bars of pressure. So each bar is about 12 pounds. So you start seeing, and this is negative pressure, of course. So this is the amount of vacuum that the vine is actually doing to bring water up into from the ground into the canopy. So we start seeing stress around 9 bars right in here. During a typical summer day, in the middle of it, you'll usually get around 14 to 15 is about as much stress as we want to see there. So once we get up to about that, or if we get past that, which I've seen, then you have to put a little bit of water on those vines there.
So do you then actually add the water in the heat of the day, which hasn't normally been the standard practice?
No. Well, this is why we're using the system now, is because I can schedule and have it come on during the night instead of having irrigators out in the
that
day.
day you get a reading which asks for it the subsequent night.
Exactly.
Thank you.
Exactly. So we can basically water anytime. So and that's one of the things we like to do is water at nighttime. So this is a good double check to make sure that we're actually seeing the stress that we're seeing. Also, visual symptoms are really good. Boots out in the vineyard are essential. So there's certain things that happen to the vine. First signs of stress usually is start seeing the tendrils start to wilt and come off, and then your growth tips start slowing down and start folding leaves over the tips, and then the ultimate amount of stress is when the leaves start turning away from the sun. So vines don't wilt. So if you ever go out in a vineyard, you'll notice that no matter how much stress they have on them, they don't wilt. So, but they will protect themselves by actually turning the leaves away from the sun, and you can kind of see it when you look up into Vineyard Row. And instead of seeing the nice green canopy, it'll be almost kind of a gray silver color that you see up the row. So it's a good way of measuring stress also. So like I said, we recycle all of our winery water. So we're also collecting during rain events, and our reservoirs are going to be covered. So this is our water treatment facility. So This is the digestive pond here. So this is where all the water from the winery goes into. So you'll see this is a kind of an overview. This is the digestive pond here. And then you'll see there's a wetland right here, which I think I have a closer up picture in the next slide. Basically, those are aquatic plants that will buffer out any kind of nutrients that might be in there that might be left over from this process that happens in here. And then eventually it dumps out into this pond right here.
Now, if you cover it, would those plants cease to function?
Yeah, you don't want to cover that particular pond. Plus, that actually, it briefly goes through that pond there. So there's not a whole lot of water that's held in there. It's basically a gravel pit, and those plants are right in that gravel there.
So moving through the pond is simply a process.
Exactly.
It's stored.
Exactly.
Okay.
Yeah. So you'll see. We'll get out to. Let's see. Let me go back here. So you'll see that we'll take out any kind of big pieces, grapes, stems, that kind of thing that might make it over to the pond. That gets filtered out through this system here. This is an aerobic process, so you must have oxygen within the pond to have those enzymes and bacteria in there working to break down all of that material that might be in that water. So these are actual blowers that blow into the pond. So here's a close-up picture of the aquatic plants here, and this is our holding pond here. This is going to get a cover here coming up here probably in about a month or so.
Just like a sheet of plastic kind of cover?
Yeah, and I'll show it to you here. I've got, in a further slide, I've got a picture of a pond that we just covered. So, and I'll show you how that works. So it's a picture of the winery. Here's the drains, and so when they do operations and cleaning barrels, they will put the barrels right over these drains here. Those drains drain into a pump system, which you'll see, and that pumps right over to the pond. So, and also, amazingly enough, you would think that to get part of our LEED certification, you had to have hoses with actual nozzles on them. You'd be surprised at how many wineries will just have water just kind of, they'll open it up and just keep it running. So that's definitely a part of that certification. So we have these all over the place for easy use for the winery workers. So here's our pump station. So everything from the winery and from the roof go into one of these cisterns here, and you can see this cistern here has got a little bit of water in it. It's really hard to see. Plus, I didn't want to drop my phone into that thing, so I kind of took a quick picture and got the heck out of there. So anyway, so that's kind of what that looks like, and then that actually pumps all the way over to it's probably about a quarter mile away the pond. So, but it's on the property. So here's a picture of a cover of the other pond that we have. So you'll see here. This is going to be, this is actually after the last rain event that we had. So it's a little hard to see what's going on here. So there's actually a pump that's right here. There's a line going up here that's actually pumping this water back into this reservoir here. So there's actually a little vent here that vents. And then this is actually a series, this is a floating cover. So there's a series, there's floats right in the middle of this, and on each side you've got weights here and weights here. So basically we want that thing to just sit right on top of the water, but we don't want it to sink, but we don't want it to blow up and blow off. So this basically takes care of 99.5% of evaporation in our ponds. So.
Jason, are
yes.
they lined underneath as
yes,
well?
They are lined.
They're lined,
Yep.
So it's like a double layer, and then once the water, how does the water go from this level underneath this floating top cover then?
How does it get pumped in and out?
Yeah, I'm not quite sure where that...
Okay. So you'll see right up in here, there's a little pipe sticking out here. So there's actually water that will drain in through this pipe here. And then here, there's actually pipes that are going down that are at the bottom of this pond here. So you've actually this is actually a drain pipe here. So all of the incoming water is coming in through here.
Is that being pumped out then? Is that pumped water that's going into there? And
Yeah,
where's the water?
so what we're doing here, we're going to be actually putting a water collection system over at our tasting room and at our winery over there. And we're going to be collecting water to put into this pond here. So there's also going to be some well water that's going to be used in here. And we use that as the reason why we use a pond for that is because we use that as a buffer. So we don't use a whole lot of water, but when we do, we need it right away just because watering from the wells would just take a little bit too long to do. So
How big is that picture, Jason? I mean, how big is that?
this is a 5-acre foot pond.
Really?
So, yeah. So,
Doesn't do it justice.
How many of those do you have?
that's just one of those, and the other pond that you saw was a 3-acre foot pond. So that's the only two ponds.
8 acre feet.
So 8 acre feet services. We've got almost 80 acres planted right now. So that services most of it. Amazingly enough, that rainwater will take me through. 2 years ago, that took me through to about August. So and from August on, I was using well water after that. So it's hugely beneficial. It's amazing. Plus the rainwater is a lot better quality than anything that I can pump out of the ground. So here's another thing we use here is this big box here is what they call a VFD drive, a variable fluid drive, which basically we can program. This is hooked up to any kind of pump that we have. So our well pumps and also our pond pumps. So and basically what this does is I can program this to run at a constant pressure as far as the irrigation pump goes from the pond, or when it comes to wells, I can have it pumped to a certain level and then it'll adjust to keep it at that level. So that way you're not overdrafting your wells and pumping them dry and then turning them off and then maybe they'll fill up. So anyway, so this automatically keeps your wells right at a certain level when you're actually using them. So very beneficial. And this is just a picture of a pressure compensating emitters. So these aren't necessarily new technology, but they're very important in the fact that older emitters didn't have this pressure compensating property to them. So the older emitters, if you had more pressure, more water would go out into the field, and it wasn't very accurate. So these are very accurate. We use half-gallon an hour emitters, which are the smallest. The biggest are 2 gallon an hour. So. Another thing to consider is actually rootstocks, which a lot of people don't realize or understand. There's a ton of them. There's a ton of different ones, and some are drought resistant, and some are not drought resistant at all. So a lot of these rootstocks. So this is actually the crosses here. So for instance, this Belandi area here is a rootstock that they found in the middle of the Arizona desert, and so and it's also in an area where there's quite a bit of limestone. So this particular rootstock does very, very well at tolerating lime, and it's also very very drought tolerant. So and it has all these have a rooting profile. Some of them are almost horizontal. This one here is actually almost kind of a diagonal, and then there's other rootstocks. One called rupestris that actually goes straight down. And so And these are the ones that we're looking at here, that we're using mostly on the field. So this 1103 Paulson, 140 Ruggieri, 110R, these are all ones that we really want to be concentrating on in an area, especially in Paso Robles. So they've got a high amount of line tolerance. These ones they tolerate some nematodes, high drought tolerance here. So they're very, very good in those areas there. So here's a report on one of my blogs here. I was hoping this would show up a little bit better. So this kind of gives you an idea of how much water that we used in this. And this is kind of an average of our blocks here. So this number here is telling me how many acre feet I'm using here. So this particular block is a little over 2 acres. So if you break it down to per acre use, we're using under 0.2 of an acre foot in this particular block a year. So most vineyards are using at least an acre foot. If you're using high production, if you're doing high production like in the Central Valley where you're growing a lot of tonnage, it's not surprising to use 2 acre feet of water per acre a year.
So were you able to sustain that small amount this last summer when we had protracted heat?
Yeah.
Wow.
So this was actually this year.
Wow.
Yeah. So this kind of calls into how efficient these vines are at using water, and so these are actually all the watering events here. So there's I don't know, there's maybe about nine or 10 there. So
Do you have like how much you were using 5 or 8 years ago to know if you're using?
Yeah, so a couple of years back, before we really got some rainfall, we were using about twice this. So we were using about 1/3 of an acre foot. So still pretty good, but the vines kind of suffer when that happens. So this last year, we actually the March rains were a huge boon to us, and so. Even though it wasn't a lot, it came at the exact right time because, right in March is right before we start seeing bud break, and so that whole field ended up, our vineyards ended up starting with a full complement of water within the root system. It's pretty important because. If we don't do that, if we get all of our rains early and it doesn't keep raining, then we got to start usually irrigating early because you'll get this draining effect on the system. So,
do you ever use water for frost protection in the spring, or do you have another way of dealing with it?
I don't know, and I'll tell you that's a good question, and I'll talk a little bit about that and the reasons to use water for frost and why. So this is some pictures of some frost control. This is obviously a very cold area here. So I don't think I've ever seen. I've seen this once when I was working in Napa, and I prefer, if you can, to use wind machines. The reason why is this uses a ton of water, as you know. It also prohibits me from getting out in the field here. This saturates the whole area here. So as far as tractor work or anything else like that, I've got to wait for all this to dry up. And if I get multiple frost events, this could totally saturate this area, and it ends up kind of almost flooding the field. And so if you can get away with not using water, I highly recommend it, especially in this area where you've got a lot of salts in the water in some of these areas. So this kind of gives you an idea of frost protection and why water is used. So you can see that overhead sprinklers can protect down to about 23 degrees. And basically it's using the heat that's within that water and spreading it over that ice casing. So you would think that ice casing, there's going to be damage in there. But if you keep that ice casing at 32 degrees with water, you won't have any damage. So, however, it uses a lot of water. This is actually an average here. You can actually, sometimes you can get up to 90 gallons a minute per acre of water use. And so you can kind of see how much water this uses per acre. It's a lot. So you start adding that up, and this is actually per hour. So if you've got a cold night and you're running your sprinklers 8-10 hours, you're gonna use about a tenth of an acre foot out there in just one night. So it's a lot of water.
That's per acre.
Yeah, that's per acre. Yep. So the other one you can use if you need water, you can use micro sprinklers, which are basically these sprayers that you can put inside the canopy. Technically, you can get it down to about 26 degrees, but again, it's gonna depend on the conditions that are out there. So uses a lot less water, but you're still using water out there. So some of these other ones. So wind machines are what you'll see, besides water. And basically, what that's doing is during the night you'll see you'll have an inversion layer that's out there, and it's usually around 10 to 12 feet above the vineyard. And that inversion layer is usually can be up to 10 degrees warmer than the air that's on the ground. So basically, you're taking that warm air up above, mixing it down below, and you're bringing the temperature of the vineyard up and protecting those lines. So if you have a strong inversion layer here, you can protect down to about 28 degrees, which is pretty good. So when we were putting in a vineyard in the Edna Valley over here, the vineyard manager that was there before wanted to develop this vineyard, wanted to put in sprinklers, and I said, well, wait a second, let's take a look at this. So I actually brought Mark Batney out, and he did some work with some put out a pole with temperature sensors. Oops, sorry. With temperature sensors about every 6 inches, and he did a little experiment with me a year before putting that vineyard in. And the conclusion was that it would get cold there. I think the coldest night was 28 degrees, but he said you had a really good inversion layer during those nights, and it was at least 10 degrees. He said one night it was actually 12 degrees. So we put in wind machines out there, and they've worked brilliantly ever since. So anyway, so that's really one way that could save a tremendous amount of water.
Do you think, is there a lot of sprinklers, frost control in our county?
There's, not necessarily. I don't know about some of the Edna Valley does have it. I don't know some of the other areas. I know that the east side of Paso does have quite a few sprinklers out there. So as far as saving water, that's probably where the low-hanging fruit is. So, but of course, wind machines are expensive. So if you want these guys to consider wind machines, it's definitely going to have to be something that probably would have to be incentivized. And just because these guys have a tremendous amount of water and they're using it there. So here are some final thoughts. So I was talking to a guy over at Tablas Creek, and they do a lot of interesting things out there, and they're talking about during rainstorms they were going to create these keyways, and I go, I don't know what you're talking about. And so he says, well, so in some of these hillsides, he says if you've got some pretty good draining soils, he says if you put in a keyway and let that water drain into these keyways, it'll make it right into the aquifer below. And so instead of running off into some other areas where it's not going to be useful. So I thought that was kind of an interesting point. So they were going to do some work with that, and hopefully they share that with the rest of us. So one of the other things that might be nice is these restrictions on some of the surface water collection. And I'm not talking about collecting out of a stream or anything like that, but simply when the water hits the ground, usually it's that's state water by then. And so if I've got an area where it drains out, technically I'm not supposed to take any of that water, even if it doesn't go anywhere, if it just collects and it just kind of sits there. And so if I can collect that water, first of all, that water is just, it's so much, the quality of it is so much better than the water that I can, like I said, pump out of the ground. The water that comes out of the ground in most of the areas, a lot of sodium, a lot of chlorides, which are bad for vineyards. So that would be an interesting thing. Create some incentives for alternatives like wind machines. That would be, I think that would save a tremendous amount of water out of the vineyards. So here's another one here, is that there's a sunset clause on irrigated acreage. So if you pull out some acreage, I think you have to replant it within 5 or 6 years or something like that. There's some vineyards that I know that they don't necessarily need the vineyard, but they want to protect their irrigated water rights. So this could be something here. If somebody's willing to keep vineyards out or any kind of irrigated acreage, it would be nice to kind of get rid of that clause there. So, and also, if just kind of keep in mind any future legislation that comes to cut water to agriculture. Hopefully we would take into account people that are actually voluntarily using a lot of these good practices. So I think that should definitely be taken into consideration instead of doing a blanket recommendation. If you're using this kind of water, you got to cut it by 20%, 30%, whatever it's going to be. So,
right, there isn't currently, and you don't get any kudos for doing that stuff.
Exactly.
You just get historic use, and that's it.
So anyways, it's just kind of some of the things that I was thinking about, and I know that there are probably other things, but anyways, that's it.
Thank you. A couple minutes for questions.
Quick question. What do you do with the byproduct off your stream system? Is that a soil amendment, or can it be used for
It's a good question.
livestock feed or anything like that?
Yeah, so we actually are doing our own compost. I've actually hired a person to actually make compost for us. Be amazed at how hard it is to do, properly. So we're actually using that and we're composting it, putting it back out in the vineyard. So and we're doing that with all of our winery hummus and everything like that. So we're also taking green waste from any kind of trees limbs that might fall or things of that nature. We'll chip it up, we'll grind it up after that, put it in a compost pile, and compost it and use it out in the vineyard.
In that case, then annual grape prunings you just grind in place?
Yes. So you'll see this particular. So this is Hard Hill Vineyard. Obviously, you've probably seen it on the West 46. So when I go and prune this vineyard here, everything that's pruned off goes in these avenues here, and the benefit for that is I don't till this at all either, because these areas, you can see how steep this is. It's highly erosive. So we don't till in here, but we do permanent cover crop in here. So this cover crop is actually a blend of native grasses and native clovers. So it's a really good. It's drought tolerant. It actually will pull nitrogen out of the air, and the vines can use it. And And then also the prunings will actually over time kind of they break down over time, but they'll make a network of almost kind of a net. And so when I'm going through with a tractor, it'll actually ease any kind of compaction that might happen. That's one of the problems too with vineyards. You're driving over the same avenue all the time, and compaction can be a problem. Compaction destroys soil structure, it impedes water penetration and water holding capacity. So we're constantly trying to mitigate anything that we do out here in the vineyards out here to make sure that we're getting full use out of the whole soil profile and also any of the water that happens to get penetrate in there.
How common are the practices that you employ in this community or in this area?
There's some people that incorporate some of that, but I can't. I know that a lot of the higher end guys will do that. So, but as far as quantification of it, I can't really tell you. So, as far as percentage, but if you've
Well,
got
you guys have all your own vineyard blocks, and they're not leased out at all, are they?
No.
Yeah, a lot of vineyards on the west side are all leased out.
Yeah, we're all a state, so
Yeah.
it's everything that we grow goes to the winery. But I do have a few wineries that we sell to. Okay. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Outstanding to have resources like that in our group, so thank you for that. All right. Next item is the ad hoc subcommittee on additional water conservation measures. I think at this point we decided to we'll report next time in February, right? So we don't have any update this time unless there was any questions from the group. All right, and then next item is the future agenda items. And we've talked about having members, any of our members are invited to make a presentation. It doesn't have to be as long and robust as Jason's, but just an opportunity for us to all learn from each other what issues are going on for your district, your jurisdiction, or your interest area. So I don't know if does anybody have anything that they'd like to kind of looking ahead to February or March would be interested in making even just a 5 or 10 minute presentation about kind of what are your issues of concern on industry, on associates. Eric?
This isn't an offer to present, but a kind of a request, and I know I made it last month, but it's particularly pertinent now. Yesterday we had the county's federal lobbyists present giving a report, and the issue of funding for expanding the Salinas Reservoir keeps coming up very prominently, and I probably am not the only one with a lot of questions about it. I encourage the board members to read the couple decades old EIR on the previous project and essentially see at that time how much concern there was in the North County, which now seems to be supposedly the beneficiary of a project. And so there are a lot of questions about whose project it would be. Would the live stream agreement be renegotiated? By whom, how, with what goals in mind? How would the considerable areas downstream that would be flooded very quickly and in the event of a dam failure at that higher level be protected? What kind of dam safety improvements? What is the overall cost? And then upstream there's a considerable riparian zone that, of course, such riparian zones have gotten increasingly rare in California. that would be inundated. So there's a whole raft of questions, and I know there are people in Washington and Sacramento and so on looking for funding for something. We don't, right here at the ground level, have much information about what that something is, what it would do for whom, what it would do to whom. So I would certainly welcome whoever has solid information to present about what we're asking for and why would be very valuable.
Right, thank you. Good feedback. Any other agenda items? We have a list here that we kind of go through and pick from. Ray and I'll go through, but any other specific requests? Okay, and then the last item is public comment for items not on the agenda. Does anybody have anything else? Yeah.
Yeah, I'm Bob Preston, Cambria CSD. I'm planning on retiring at the end of this month.
Oh.
So I won't be a voting member most likely after that time.
Okay.
So I'd like to introduce, Melissa Bland and Madrid here, and they'll decide who's going to be, passed through whatever resolution our board has to pass to have new members from Cambria CSD. So anyway, thank you. And I'm still around. I might be coming here as a fly on the wall, as they say.
All right.
Keep my ear to rail. So.
Well, thank you for your service. Appreciate that. Great.
Lucky you.
Sorry, Tim, not yet. Anybody else? All right. Meeting adjourned. Have a fabulous rest of December, and we'll see you in January.
February.
February. We'll see you in February. Thank you.